Good afternoon. Welcome in. I'm Ian Grant, and this is Ask the Expert here on News Talk 1010 Toronto. You know, a couple of years ago, I broke my wrist, and more than a couple of fingers, it turned out. And honestly, I was instantly reminded just how quickly independence can absolutely vanish. Suddenly, I couldn't do basic things like tying my shoes or opening a jar. Actually, I don't remember the last time I did tie my shoes, but that's not the point. You know, the moment did drive home just how vital in-home support is. It is not just for the person needing the care. Honestly, it really is for the whole family. My guest this hour is Dani DePetrillo. She is Chief Operating Officer at Right at Home Canada. Now, they provide customized in-home care for seniors and adults with disabilities, not only across the GTA, but all across Canada. Dani, we did a show a while back. It is great to have you join us again. Thank you, and welcome back.
Thank you so much, Ian. Yes, we were just talking before the show. It's been a number of years, and everybody's last 4 or 5 years have whipped by, haven't they?
I remember saying, time flies over us, but leaves its shadow behind. The things that we have learned, the things that have changed in the last 4 or 5 years alone. Dani, before we get right into the thick of things, why don't you take a second and introduce any listeners who don't know and remind those listeners who do all about Right at Home Canada.
So Right at Home is one of the largest providers of exceptional in-home supportive care services to older adults and differently abled members of our community. So we bring in a suite of services, everything from housekeeping and homemaking, making meals, all the way through nursing care and end of life, and absolutely everything in between. We're in 6 countries around the world, if you can believe it.
Wow.
And we have about 60 offices across our beautiful country and support hundreds of communities in Canada. One thing I always stop to say, though, is, despite the size of our organization, we really are very much grassroots in every community where we are. No two families are the same, as you know, Ian, and the supports that we provide families can never look the same because, I say families are snowflakes. Everything's going to look very different depending on what the circumstances are. So we're sort of large company, small feel, and that's sort of a point of pride for us here at Right at Home.
Can we talk a little bit about just how your mission has evolved since we last spoke?
Yeah, of course. So our mission's sort of held true. Our mission is to improve the quality of life of those we serve. I look at it with a wider lens. The quality of lives that we touch would be everything from our wonderful caregivers and our nursing teams that are actually delivering the care in clients' homes, but the clients, and then, just as important as our clients are our families that are supporting them when we're not there. So that mission has stayed the same. I would say that one thing that has kind of shifted since the last time we chatted is that we are looking a little bit more seriously at engaging conversations much earlier in the process. And so we're starting to talk about living. And if anybody has heard me talk about my parents, I know exactly what they want to do when they pass away. I know exactly what they want their service to look like or not look like. But if I weren't in this industry, I'm not sure I would be having the conversation about what the 20-year stretch of road before that point in time might look like. And so we're trying to really normalize the discussions around, what happens as we become less independent in our homes. What do we want? Do we want to stay in our homes as long as possible? 96% of Canadians do. There are a number of options out there, but I would say that our mission now runs sort of parallel to that thought about let's have this conversation earlier, if that makes sense to you, Ian.
It makes tons of sense, and one of the reasons it really does hit home, on one of the financial shows I was doing just a couple of weeks ago, I was mentioning that throughout the week, I also do a consulting job with an awful lot of funeral homes. I go in there and design and consult on audiovisual stuff. Going into those homes, it takes a lot of the mystery and it makes it a little more comfortable dealing in that kind of environment. Was out with friends a couple of weeks ago, and I'm sitting there, and he was talking about his mom who was getting on and, wasn't sure how much longer she'd be around. And I launched into exactly that. Well, I hope you've had the conversation with her about, what her plans are, what she wants to do. And, you really need to talk to her about this because, A, she may not get the chance to explain to you what happens. And B, it's a conversation that everyone needs to have. And then I look around and all of a sudden the table has just gone completely silent. And my buddy has tears rolling down his eyes. And he's like, how can you talk about this stuff? And, I came back with, how can you not?
Yeah. And it's funny because having the conversation around what happens at the point of passing seems to be a more comfortable conversation than saying, "Hey, mom, like, what do you really want to do if God forbid, you're, diagnosed with a disease
Yeah.
or you start to struggle and, our two-story home where you raised your five daughters is no longer manageable for you. Like, what options do we have?" And it is a harder conversation. It's harder to broach, and people don't necessarily think to talk about it. It's really a disproportionate number of people calling us in distress and in crisis versus in planning mode.
Yeah.
And anytime someone does call us and they're talking planning mode, I almost want to jump off my chair and jump up and down and say, "Thank you."
Yeah.
Good for
It's
you
true,
for like
though.
planning for these things because life can happen on a dime and a plan can't always be followed. But if you have a well laid plan, at least you have a path that you're going to try to follow. You know what, at the end of the day, that's what that person really wants is to stay home or not stay home. But it's an important conversation, Ian.
Yeah, and you really do kind of sometimes just have to hold your breath and forge forward with that conversation because, as you said, I mean, there's no perfect place to bring it up. You bring it up at the dinner table and everyone looks at you like you've got two heads. You bring it up sitting on the couch, it's the same thing. But what happens is that after this conversation, and what I've discovered just with talking with friends and stuff is after the first conversation, the second one's a little bit easier. The third one, really easier. And by the fourth one, you're really kind of putting the plans together. You're having a very normal, regular conversation about what this person wants. What do they expect to happen? What would they like to happen? There are people that have said they're okay. They just want to stay in their home. That's their big thing. They can deal with whatever lies ahead, but, I want to stay in my home. Well, that sounds like a fairly simple request, and it's not.
You're right. It isn't. And I'm no longer, unfortunately, working with families directly. I did it for a number of years. I love it. I support our local offices now more so. But I remember clients saying to me, "You can take me out of this house in a pine
Yep.
box."
Yep.
And they don't care what it takes to make that happen, but they really turn to sort of professionals and people who understand how to navigate the system and what options there are to guide them through that process. And the conversation is the one thing, but having a conversation blind to what the options are is a totally different discussion. And we're really focusing on educating the community on what are the options and doing so in a neutral way. We actually just did a live webinar yesterday on understanding options as someone's independence is changing. And, so many participants and just learning basic things that we don't have. We don't have a source of this. Our family physicians, unfortunately, don't necessarily understand all of the options. And even if they did, they're very busy, and I respect that. But there's no like sort of social navigators unless you're in hospital and then, they'll help you navigate. But it's one of those things that is a really important piece of this puzzle is understanding what's out there.
One of the things I asked you about as we were talking leading up to the show was how COVID changed things because
Okay.
that kind of forced people to have these conversations that they probably would never have even considered before that. But, there's so many different areas where COVID changed the way we think.
It really did. And looking at COVID from in the rear view, we learned so much as an organization, as a community, as medical and care providers. Trying to debunk the myths in those early days and trying to pivot and navigate these uncharted waters was a real bonding experience for the medical community. I think we're all a lot stronger coming out of it. But what it really did was it helped families understand the importance of bringing care home. And that's not to the exclusion of what we call residential living or congregate living. Those are very vital residences and communities in our within our larger community. They serve tremendous purposes and they have amazing social aspects, what have you. But a lot of families from COVID are like, you know what, I feel safer in my home. Um, I want to stay there as much as possible, and their door kind of opened a little bit more because understanding that if they wanted to achieve that goal, they really needed to look at what services or options were out there to help them achieve it. And so a little bit more, I don't know, understanding of what we do and the
Mm.
importance. we do in them achieving their end goal. That was a real shift for us with COVID.
Is it one of those areas that if I was having this conversation and I thought it, it might be a little difficult or there could be some rock? I mean, I'm not an expert. I don't know the answers. Could I contact Right at Home Canada and have someone join me on the line as we're having this discussion to kind of fill in any questions that could arise?
Oh my goodness. Can you? Yeah, absolutely. And we encourage it because we have wonderful people within every office called care planner. And a big job of the care planners is to help people shepherd them through their options and understand and navigate. And so if, a daughter, for example, were to call and just not understand what options there were, we have all kinds of resources. We can sit down and chat with them on the phone. We can do a Zoom call with them and their three brothers who are in Vancouver. And we can just kind of help them understand, point
Nice.
them in the right direction so that when the time comes, they can make the right decision.
I was just thinking as you were talking there, you gear up to have the conversation and then you start the conversation, and three sentences into the conversation, you realize you really don't know the questions to ask. So that would be
So
perfect. Let's take a break. And when we come back after traffic, Right at Home is built on people, and the people matter. In our next segment, we're going to talk about caregiver matching, training, and how Dani's team can ensure that your loved ones see the same familiar face every day. Exceptional care from their family to yours. This hour on Ask the Expert, I'm joined by Dani DePetrillo. She is Chief Operating Officer at Right at Home Canada. Right at Home can top up the support already provided by family members, government resources, or retirement residences. Their flexible, professional, and relationship-oriented support is there when you need it the most. So much more than just a home care company. For more information, give them a call at 1-855-983-4663. That's 1-855-983-4663. And check out their website for contact information, articles, and more. Right at Home Canada, all one word, rightathomecanada.com. I'm Ian Grant. Ask the Expert continues here on News Talk 1010 Toronto. Welcome back. This is Ask the Expert here on News Talk 1010 Toronto. I'm Ian Grant. I'm joined this afternoon by Dani DePetrillo, and we are talking about home care. Now, Dani, for anyone that has just joined us over the last 15 minutes or so, let's really briefly bring them up to speed on what Right at Home Canada is.
So we are a provider of in-home support and care services. And I say support and care because sometimes we're not actually caring for a client. We're just supporting them in their home environment. We can deliver services wherever home happens to be for them in that moment in time. It could be a daughter's home, it could be their traditional home, it could be a condo, it could be a hospital. It could be anywhere that they happen to be. And the range of services that we can provide are everything from kind of what your daughter might want to do, which is making meals and doing the laundry, and perhaps she can't be there, helping our clients with their personal care, grooming and bathing, and then all the way up to nursing care. And unfortunately, in some cases, end of life,
Mm-hmm.
palliative care, hospice at home. So that's what we do, Ian.
Tell you what, then, why don't we talk a little bit about the people who make this kind of care work and how you maintain consistency, you maintain trust, you maintain quality. We were talking earlier how I went through an experience with my wife where we had a palliative care nurse in here for a while, and just her being here, I mean, she was an absolute godsend. I thought I could do it on my own. There's no way I could have done it on my own. Knowing that she was there every day, she was the same face. She was one of the few things in an absolutely chaotic period in my life that was the same. It was reliable. It was just, the continuity was incredibly important.
Yeah, and the continuity is critical when we're dealing with our clients. And it's funny, before the show, it has been a long time since we chatted, but you remembered the nurse's name and it was 5 years
Oh,
ago.
Corinne, she was, like I
Yeah.
said, she was an angel.
And that's the kind of relationship that you want to have with the people coming into your home. And so for us, one of our pillars is the consistency of care, and we do that through what we call our care teams. And care teams really are a small hand-selected group of skilled. Of course, they have to have the skill set to care for a client, but also ideally otherwise well matched. So it might be language, it might be personality, it might be interest, those kinds of things, And that hand-selected group of individuals are the ones that commit to that client. And it may not be that one person every single day, because if you rely very heavily on one person and life happens to that one
Yeah,
person, we're
that's true.
backtracking. But we do try to keep our care teams as tight as possible, depending on the care scenario and how critical the support that we're providing is. But that's really sort of the crux of what we do. Everything is around building that care team that's right for that specific client, so that they can build those relationships, which are so critical to the success of, in-home supportive care services.
Danny, one of the other things that was so vital for me was that Corinne had done it all before. When the questions arose, it was like having someone that knew the route that you were going to take, grab your shoulders and kind of guide you through it. I mean, I had no clue what was happening, and she was just right there saying, even up until the last few days when she's saying, okay, now we can expect this to happen, and this is going to happen, and don't be surprised if this happens. And it was just invaluable having her.
Yeah, I mean, she's a palliative care nurse and incredibly skilled and obviously dedicated to her families. The skill sets and the expertise and the knowledge really does come into play, especially in some of our specialized care, supportive care services situations, such as, if someone's dealing with Alzheimer's disease or Lewy body dementia, helping them through challenges with their independence, and having care staff, caregivers that understand the uniqueness of that particular condition or disease. Same with Parkinson's disease, different things like that. Having them have experience, having them have access to ongoing training, and having them have access to a care planner who can shepherd them through situations that they may not be, overly familiar with, is so critical. When we're dealing with less complex care scenarios, sometimes it's just the heart of the person. If you're coming in and providing companionship to one of our clients, having that big heart and that warmth, and being able to, help them make the meal with a smile, is really where that relationship is too. So it's kind of both sides of the equation in terms of the expertise there, and how important it is.
And one of the things that Right at Home does really, really well is you take great care in matching the caregivers to the clients. It's not just based on skills, but it's also personality and an appropriate fit.
It is, and it's so funny because I used to be a care planner in our system, and I mentioned earlier I used to work with families, and I so miss it. But it was me knowing my staff, and this is one of the fundamentals of all of our offices. Our care planners need to know their care staff, and they need to know them quite deeply. Like, I used to know what 3-year-olds' birthdays were coming up from our care staff, and
Wow.
weekend kind of thing. But that is critical because this is such a human business. It's such a human service. A lot of organizations might match using a computer, and I'm not, our teams are not necessarily into that. We like the more human elements to it, and the care matching that comes with the human filter.
There's a lot of training involved, and one of the things that my nurse explained to me, because we had a lot of time to talk, it's not just a matter of training up to the position, the ongoing training, the ongoing even counseling and guidance that the caregivers receive, it just helps them in a day-to-day basis. They're going through some great experiences. If you're there, helping a mom with a new baby and that kind of thing, then, it's a completely different experience than, if you're there with someone who is, watching their partner slowly end their life.
You're absolutely right. So the training is critical, and knowing that our caregivers have the support of our office 24/7 is also tremendously important for them, because they may be in circumstances that they're unsure what to do, or they may be in circumstances where they're not feeling that they can, that they need some guidance in how to best manage that circumstance. So knowing that they can call their care planners any time of day, or call our office any time of day, is so critical. So it is a combination of the ongoing education piece, and having access to whatever sort of trainings they feel, and supporting them in specialized training, as well as knowing that there's always that care planner there to support them. We have their back, and shepherd them through those circumstances.
A lot of people don't realize that you also offer nursing services too. What
We
kind of
do.
medical support can be done at home?
Wow, the nursing field has really expanded their scope. And the nurses in our communities are so critical to the infrastructure of our medical community at large. And our nurses can come in and do everything from, ostomy care, wound care, um, picks and ports and IVs and all of that good stuff. And then we have our very specialized, as you had mentioned earlier, Ian, the palliative care teams, and hospice at home is an area that is it's, as you know, very emotional,
Hmm.
but more and more people are looking to spend their final days at home. It's a little bit more complicated and a little bit more complex, and so having our nursing team being able to assist them with those wishes is such a point of pride for us. And yeah, so really, the nursing at home side of things is really expanded in the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years.
Danny, just before we head into traffic, what would you say one of the biggest misconceptions is about what you do?
I would say the biggest misconception is that by bringing in-home care services that you're going to lose your independence. In fact, our goal is to make you more independent.
Hmm.
We're there beside our clients, helping them maximize their independence with, with their any limitations in mind. But really our focus is, what can I do with my client today that's going to make them realize that they do have a lot of ability. And I would say that that is the biggest misconception with in-home care services.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, trying to navigate care options, it can just be absolutely overwhelming. So let's talk a little bit about government programs, financial aid, and just how Right at Home helps families find clarity. For more information, give them a call at 1-855 983 4663. That's 1-855 983 4663, and check out their website for contact information, articles, and more. Right at Home Canada, all one word, rightathomecanada.com. I'm Ian Grant. Ask the Expert continues here on News Talk 1010 Toronto. We're back. This is Ask the Expert here on News Talk 1010 Toronto. My guest this afternoon, Dani DePetrillo. She is COO of Right at Home Canada. And boy, you know what? We're having a conversation. We started the show talking about how these are the conversations that need to be had, and we are certainly having those conversations today. Talk a little bit, as again, for anyone who's joined us. What is Right at Home Canada?
So Right at Home Canada is a large provider of in-home supportive care services. And really, with every single client that we work with and every single family that we work with, we try to really understand what's happening in the home, and what types of support and or care might be helpful for that particular family in achieving their goals to stay home as safely and independently as they wish to. So we might be able to go in and do some housekeeping and some laundry. We might be able to go in and play bridge with a client while their wife is out, having lunch with her friends. We can bring in personal care services, helping someone with their grooming, their personal care, their bathing. We can bring in nursing services, and absolutely everything and anything in between. So really just a suite of in-home supportive care services that are designed for that specific client and that specific family on a very unique basis.
Danny, can you talk about some of the government programs or financial support that may be available out there and how you help clients access them? Because when I went through this experience, I had no idea. I mean, it's the old, you don't know what you don't know. And I had no idea that there was this kind of support available.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is true. You don't know what you don't know until you actually have to get to know it. And there are some wonderful government supports out there. So here in Ontario, we have what's now called Ontario Health at Home. It used to be called CCAC back in the day, if anybody remembers CCAC, and the number to access them is still the old CCAC number, even though they've went through a number of different iterations since that point in time, from the CCAC to the LIN and now Ontario Health at Home. And we are exceptionally fortunate to have government-supported in-home care services. Are they easy to navigate? Not always. Do they provide everything that someone needs? Not always. And that's why it's really important to have a talented care planner like the ones that we have within our organization there to help put pieces of the puzzle together. And piece together perhaps government supports, piece together uh, home care services that might be covered by an insurance policy, piece together schedules that might work with the daughters who drop in on Wednesdays and Fridays, and just really sort of putting all of the pieces of the puzzle in front of a family and helping them understand how everything can work together, and it's not to the exclusion of any piece of that puzzle, if that makes sense.
It does. And one of I didn't realize that CCAC was Lynn, because Lynn was something that our nurse introduced us to pretty much from day one, where, she said, these are resources where you don't know who to ask these questions to. And she said, if you have a question that I'm not available for, or I can't help, call, it was the East End of Toronto, Lynn, that we were dealing with, and they will find you the answers. And they did.
Yep. Our system is actually very, very good. It's designed in a way that helps families navigate. In some cases, there are some gaps. I mean, they're dealing with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families at any given moment in time. And interestingly, I mean, it might be kind of technical, Ian, but home care services are not part of the Canada Health Act, which means,
Hmm.
in a sort of simplistic way, you don't necessarily get as much as you might feel like you need. And so we're dealing with finite resources with their government, and still very fortunate to have the services that we have. But the LINs do the absolute best that they can in navigating families through the options.
Let's talk a little bit more about respite, about the support that's out there for overwhelmed family caregivers. Because, as I said, it's exactly the position I found myself in, where you're too worried to leave the person, but
Yeah.
you need that break to continue. And sometimes, even just a 2-3 hour break, just standing in the shower, knowing you have nothing to worry about other than the shower that you're now allowed to take, can be the difference between coping and falling apart.
It's so true. And we always try to look at caregivers, family caregivers, and the reliance of them in the home, because the reality is, Ian, is there's a risk with having, one primary caregiver and trying to keep a finger on the pulse as to whether he or she is burning out, because they are the pillar in that family, right? As you know all too well, the pillar in that family. And if the pillar starts to crack a little bit, in some cases, the house can crumble a
It
little
really
bit.
can. Absolutely.
It absolutely can. And so caring for the caregiver is such an important topic for family caregivers, because the health of the person upon whom we turn, or to whom we turn to care for that person who's in need in the household, is so critical. And it's not the same as a newborn and their mother, in the way that relationships have been formed for years and years and years between the two parties, the caregiver and the person that they're supporting. But having that healthy young mother and her healthy newborn, and making sure that mother is taking time for herself, is a very normal part of society, right?
Hmm.
We're always encouraging them. But do we have that same sort of lens when we're talking about family caregivers? And we have to. Giving them short breaks, even to go golf and go out for lunch or go shopping or do nothing, is such an important part of that caregiving journey.
Yeah, boy, you nailed it with the do nothing. No matter what happens, you still have the responsibility in your head when you're not handing it off to someone who is obviously equally or more responsible for that person. And it really does give you a chance to take a deep breath. I'm curious, what warning signs should family members watch for that might mean it's time to call, Right at Home Canada and get some help? Because I think it's probably, the human condition would suggest. I told you this. I figured I could do it on my own. I wanted to be the strong guy. I wanted to be the person that was there and, do all the right things. And, we didn't wait too late, but it would have been easy to miss the point where we needed to ask for that help.
Yeah, and sometimes the signs are quiet and sometimes they're very obvious. The very obvious signs is, getting kicked into hospitalization, or a very rapid advancement of an underlying condition. Those are the obvious ones. It's the quiet ones, Ian, that are the hardest, because sometimes families don't visit as often. We're busy. My mom lives 25 minutes away from me, and I think that we're fortunate to even be that close. Um, I may go there and start to notice some subtle changes.
Mm.
I may notice that perhaps the environment's not as tidy as it used to be. I notice that maybe there might be some situations where she's repeating herself in certain conversations. I might notice that she's having a hard time getting the laundry downstairs. I mean, that's an environmental consideration there for sure. So there are all of these signs, and if someone is in a situation where they're relying on a family caregiver, for example, a husband caring for a wife, we also have to watch for signs in the husband because everything's focused on the wife, but really the reliance, as we mentioned a few minutes ago, on that husband in keeping things afloat is so critical. So, looking for signs of burnout, looking for shortness, short temperedness, looking for tiredness, looking for, in some cases, an unwillingness to leave.
Yeah.
We see those unique circumstances. So, I would say watch for those quieter ones more so than the obvious ones because those are the ones that might come around the corner a little faster than you had hoped.
It's so often the things that you don't think about that come along and trip you up. I remember I had to go in for overnight surgery in the middle of my experience, and I had no clue how the heck that was going to happen because I at that point I didn't think I could do that. And again, it was pointed out to me that services like Right at Home Canada can bring in someone for the 24/7 or overnight help until I'm back on my feet again.
Absolutely. And sometimes those short duration, short spurts of care when they're needed the most are the ones that are tremendously valuable, especially in a case like yours. We also see it post-surgical. Total knees and total hips. We can go in for a couple of days just until they have their confidence back
Mm,
and make the meals and those kinds of things, knowing that that person's on the uptick, right? And that's what we want to see. We want to see that recovery. So, and we can also do overnight care for short durations. We've had clients go away on vacation and we basically go into the home for overnights because they're worried about mom overnight while they're away.
right.
The way that services can be tailored are really tremendous and again, unique to every family.
Coming up next, Right at Home Canada isn't just delivering care, they're shaping the future of home health care. What's next for the company, and how can you become part of their growing team? We'll find out. For more information, call 1 855 983 4663. That's 1 855 983 4663. And visit their website for contact information, articles, and more. RightAtHomeCanada.com. That is RightAtHomeCanada, all one word, .com. I'm Ian Grant, and Ask the Expert continues here on News Talk 1010 Toronto. We're back. This is Ask the Expert here on News Talk 1010 Toronto. I'm Ian Grant. What a fascinating guest I have this hour. I love speaking with her. And we're having a great conversation. Dani DePetrillo is here. She is the COO at Right at Home Canada. We've talked 45 minutes now about Right at Home Canada and the services you provide. And I'm sure there are people at home who've been listening for the 45 minutes saying, okay, what do I do? Where do I take this from here? How do they start that process with you?
So, I really want people, even if they're starting to explore options or if there's something noodling in the back of their head, thinking, okay, you know what, maybe I just need someone to turn to talk through some scenarios. I really encourage family members to call us. Quite honestly, it's usually the daughters and the sons, and not necessarily the direct care, client themselves. But I love it when clients call for their own information, whomever it is. Even if you're not sure whether it's something that you need or not, call us because our care planners are amazing and they are the absolute most patient, big-hearted, wonderful, skilled professionals that can kind of just point them to resources, give you the information you need in the moment, encourage you to come back if you need more information. It's like a full navigation service, and I mean, we're not looking for any expectation or obligation. We're looking to help them and those clients and those families understand what's out there and when and how to tap into things.
And speaking of resources, by the way, anyone going to rightathomecanada.com, right up there, front and center on the front page, is the resources tab. And it's obvious that you guys know what you're doing because you've laid out every possible area and question and, all the kind of things that we can talk about. This are rightathomecanada.com is the website. One of the things that jumped out to me was questions to ask home care providers, because one more time, this is not something that we do on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. For so many people, this is going to be, the first time in their life they're dealing with this. And we keep using it, and it's because it works. You don't know what you don't know. And this resource page is great at coming up with questions, solutions, ideas.
Yeah. I love the questions to ask, and whether whether someone calls and asks us the questions or whether they're using it to explore other organizations. I really encourage them to look at that questions list, because it is going to hone in on the things that are important. And the things that are important in this scenario are, one, an ability to really tailor care for that family's needs and not be sort of a one size fits all sort of organization. Accountability is also huge. Ian, it's an unregulated industry for the most part, especially once you get outside of the government care providers, which is kind of a scary concept, to be honest with you. It just means that there's no regulatory body watching what home care providers are doing. So having that accountability and having an organization that they trust, that they know is doing the right thing, is really important. And there's some really drill down questions about, how do you ensure that it's a right fit for my parent? And how do you, what happens if it's the wrong fit? Or what happens if I'm worried about the care plan? How often do you assess care plans and care needs? That's a really tremendously important question as well.
Can we talk a little bit about the technology that Right at Home can bring into the home to use as part of the job? Because it's just phenomenal how, it doesn't seem to be any bounds in turning, the living room into a hospital room.
It's true. Technology is definitely moving faster than the rest of the world. That is certainly the case. So the technologies that are more commonplace. So when we're dealing with sort of remote patient monitoring, that is the when you're talking about the hospital room coming into your living room, that is amazing technology, and that's
Hmm.
usually through our publicly funded system. Other technologies that people tend to engage in are usually around safety. So we have the wearable sort of fall detection devices that you see. You see the pendants and the things that you can carry around your wrist or your neck, and you press if there's a fall. But we've chosen to partner with a technology that I'm really excited about, and it's an audio-based technology. It doesn't require the wearables. And the thing I love about it, Ian, is it works in the background. It helps us develop the best care plan that we possibly can, because it gives us care insights through audio cues that allow us to tailor the care plan for that particular person's care needs. So it might be sort of giving us an insight that's indicative of someone perhaps having a burgeoning UTI, a urinary tract infection, sorry. It might tell us that someone is experiencing loneliness because they're turning the TV on at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
Those
Yeah.
kinds of things. It's really neat to see how this can work hand in hand with our care services, not to the exclusion of the human element, which is always the most important part for us. But the technology is such a fascinating world, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more of it in the coming years.
My partner was one of those people who wouldn't let me hire a maid service to clean the house because she said it was twice as much work because she had to clean up the house before they were allowed in, so that they wouldn't know the kind of slob that I am. What do families need to understand about trusting this new person in their home?
So it's always a bit of discomfort, and our care planners are great about preparing everyone for that first day. And what I mean by that is, we would talk to the daughter or to the clients themselves and really set up the expectation around, this is who we're discussing, this is what your care needs are, this is what to expect, and sort of bringing that down to a place where they have not as much worry about it. That is tremendously important setting them up for day one. Also, our caregivers need to be set up very, very well for day one also, because it's a new experience for them too. And so, really having that ability to make sure that everyone is okay with what we're suggesting, and making that first introduction, and then following up with anything that, any feelings that they may have about that first day, is a really critical piece in sort of bringing their comfort level down.
Dani, I got a minute left, and I want to give that
Yeah.
time to you to talk to the people, explain your services, explain how you can help, and explain how they can take that step to contacting you and even opening up, because we talked about that earlier, just how important opening up the discussion is.
We're much more than a care service. I like to think that we build relationships with clients much before that point in time. Of course, many of our clients are calling us in the crisis moment, in the care moment. But I really want to encourage the people in the community to reach out to us early in the process, so that we can help them, point them in the right direction, so that if and when the time comes for them to consider the in-home supportive care services, that they have a comfort level with us. They know what we do, and they know that we're tailoring everything for that unique family. And understanding what can actually be brought into the home is critical too. Everything from the very hands-off housekeeping, making the meals, doing the laundry. And then if someone has continence care concerns, or is having a hard time or feeling uncomfortable in the shower on their own, we can get into the personal care side of things. And then if someone is needing the nursing care services, then of course we just transition our care plan into the nursing care side of things. So it's that everything from the one side of the spectrum all the way through to the other side of the spectrum, and absolutely everything in between, and making sure that that care plan is in the moment, and supporting the independence and safety of our client as they age, and as their care needs change.
Dani DePetrillo, Chief Operating Officer at Right at Home Canada. You guys do wonderful stuff, and I really appreciate it. And thank you for joining me this hour.
It's been such a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Ian.
What a fascinating hour. Exceptional care from their family to yours. This hour on Ask the Expert, I was joined by Dani DePetrillo. She is Chief Operating Officer at Right at Home Canada. And with over 30 years of providing highly individualized, unique care experiences, Right at Home can top up the support already provided by family members, government resources, and retirement residences. Right at Home Canada takes pride in offering a full range of exceptional support and care services for those with physical, medical, or memory impairment at home, wherever home is to them. And that can be at a hospital, a retirement community, or the family home. Their flexible, professional, and relationship-oriented support is there when you need it the most. They are so much more than just a home care company. For more information, give them a call at 1-855-983-4663. That's 1-855-983-4663. And check out their website for resources, contact information, articles, and so much more. RightAtHomeCanada.com. I'm Ian Grant. As always, thank you for joining us on Ask the Expert here on News Talk 1010 Toronto.